Okay, the side splitter theorem states that if you have two parallel lines, just like we have here, and they're being intersected by two transversals, then the sides that are resulting are proportional. So I can write that y is to x as a is to b. You could also write y is to a as x is to b. And then the other proportions are flipping these over. So x is to y as b is to a, or, should have a comma, a is to y as b is to x. So whether it's 2 lines or 3 lines, like this one has 3 parallel lines, or 4 lines, or 5 lines, the sides that are resulting are still proportional. So I would still do a is to b as c is to d. And of course you can write a is to c as b is to d, and then flip those two around. So to use this, let's solve for y. So I have 2 parallel lines, and sometimes you might not be given the parallel marks. You might be given that the corresponding angles are congruent. So we know that if these 2 angles are congruent, then these 2 lines are parallel. So I'm going to do 12 is to y, and I have to be careful to go in the same order, as 10 is to 6. So this is going to be 6 times 12 is 72 equals 10y, y equals 7.2. And then number 2, the segments joining the sides of the trapezoid RSTU are parallel to its bases. So if we have this big trapezoid right here, RSTU, we know that a trapezoid has one set of opposite sides parallel, and then it reads the sides of trapezoid are parallel to its bases. So that means that these are parallel as well. So to solve for x, what I would do is, I don't want to do x is to 9 as 12.5 is to y, because I'll have 2 variables. So I'm just going to concentrate on these up here. So it's going to be x is to 6 as 12.5 is to 5. So then you're going to cross multiply. So then I use the cross product property, so it's 12.5 times 6 equals 5x. So 12.5 times 6 is 75 equals 5x. So 75 divided by 5, x equals 15. And then now I do the y part. So with the y, I'm going to use these two up here. Or actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sub in 15. Sub in 15 for x. So now you can do 15 is to 9 as 12.5 is to y. And then you cross multiply. So 15y equals, now I need to do 12.5 times 9. Which is 112.5, and divide that by 15. So y equals 7.5. So do one of the variables first, and then do the other variable. Okay, the triangle angle bisector theorem states that if you had in a triangle, if one of the angles are bisected, so bisect means to cut in half, then it creates proportional sides. So y is to w as x is to z, or x is to y as z is to w, z is to x as y is to w. So let's do that down here. So 24 is to x as 40 is to 30. Or you could have done 30 is to 40 as x is to 24. 24 is to 40 as x is to 30. There's a bunch of different ways. So then you cross multiply. So 40x equals 24 times 3 is 72. So this is 720. Divide by 40. So x equals, these two cancel out, 72 divided by 4 is 18. Okay, over here, triangle angle bisector theorem. So again, you can set up a proportion. And it doesn't matter if you have, let's say this was x plus 1. You're still going to do the same thing. You're still going to do x plus 1 is to 8 as 6 is to 5. And when you cross multiply, you just got to be careful that you use parentheses. So 5 times x plus 1. Okay, then down here, review. Find the variable in each of the triangles below. Okay, so this first triangle has a couple things going on. It has, I see that I'm going to use the triangle bisector theorem. So this would be 8, and this would be 6 plus x. So when I do that, I'm going to have 8 is to 4 as 6 plus x is to y. But that doesn't really get me anywhere. So I need to first use what we did previously, which is if you have these two parallel lines, you can use a proportion to solve for x. So I'm going to use 5 is to 3 as 6 to x. So if you run into something where you have two variables, two different variables, then you know you have to do something different. So I'm going to cross multiply. So 18 equals 5x. X equals 18 divided by 5. So 5 goes in 18 3 times with 3 left over. So 3 3/5 is 3.6. So instead of writing x, I'm going to write 3.6. Now I can use my strategy. So that I started out in red. So instead of writing x, I'm going to write 3.6. Same with right here. So this is going to turn into 9.6. So to solve for y, you're just going to do the cross product of that. Okay, and second one. 12 is to 30. So this is two parallel lines, so I'm going to do the proportion as x is to 2x plus 10. So when I cross multiply, I get 12 times the quantity 2x plus 10 equals 30x's. So 24x plus 120 equals 30x's. Subtract 24x, 120 equals 6x, x equals 20 is my answer. And then down here, review. Okay, so this is different because this is not bisecting here, this is just a 90-degree angle. So we have an altitude drawn in, and it's creating 10 and 12. So what I do is, remember, I set up 3 triangles that are all similar. So short side 10, long side x. Short side x, long side 12. In the big triangle, all I have is hypotenuse is 22. So I'm going to use proportions. X is to 10 as 12 is to x. Then when I cross multiply, I get x squared equals 120. Or x equals, I'll just leave it as 12 times 10 because that'll be easier to factor. So x squared x equals the square root of factors of 12 are 2, 2, and 3. Factor out 10 is 5 and 2. So I have 1, 2 that I could take out. So it's x equals 2 times the square root of 3 times 5 is 15 times 2 is 30. So the answer is x root 30. Or 2 root 30. And then here we go on this other triangle. It's still an altitude right here with a right triangle. So I can write 3 different triangles. So 1, 2, 3. 90, 90, 90. So in the short triangle, I don't have the long side, so I'm going to leave that blank. but the hypotenuse is y and the short side's x. On the medium triangle, I just have the long side and the hypotenuse. And then on the big triangle, I have the short side as y and the long side is 10. And the hypotenuse has to be 8 plus x. So first, when I'm looking at this, I'm trying to find a proportion. I can't do 10 is to y because there's not enough information. I can't do x is to y because there's two different variables. So what I can do on the middle triangle is do the Pythagorean theorem. So x squared, or I shouldn't maybe use x because that might be confusing because there's another x. So I'll use a squared plus 8 squared equals 10 squared. When I get down to it, I get a equals 6. So I'm going to write 6 right there. So on the short side of the long triangle, this is 6. Now I can plug that in right here. So if you know that, now, so try to do the Pythagorean theorem if you can. If you have two sides of a triangle, you can find the third. Now I can do this proportion as x is to 6 as 6 is to 8. So 8x equals 36. Divide by 8. X equals 4.5. So now you can write 4.5 in for x. And you can solve for y with the proportion. With these two, 6 is to 8 as y is to 10. And solve for y.